What? Okay. Believe it or not, when Jimmy Carter was president of the United States, there was many times where he said to his advisors, I want to go stay in somebody's house. Just stay in their house. Stay with them for the evening, sit at their kitchen table, listen to the things they have to say, listen to what is on their hearts and minds. And so that's what he did. They would actually call up American citizens at random and say, would you like for the President of the United States to come and stay at your house on Friday night? You could feed him, and then he's going to listen to what you have to say. I was just trying to imagine Trump or Obama or even Bush doing something like that, and I really can't imagine it. I mean, I just can't imagine them just calling up an ordinary human being and saying, hey, I just want to come to your house, have supper, listen to what you have to say. But I want you to imagine that scenario. Okay, maybe you don't like Trump, maybe you like somebody else, but just imagine your favorite president giving you a call on the phone and saying, can I come over on Friday night? And we'll just hang, and you can just tell me what's on your heart. How are you going to prepare for that? So just get in your head. Okay, you got 5 days. President of the United States coming to your house. How are you going to prepare? My guarantee, it would probably go something like this. You would pull out all the stops. You would clean your house so much that it sparkled. You would get your landscaping all in order. Maybe you'd even pull out the weed whacker. You would put new sheets on your guest bed, right? Because the president's going to be sleeping in it. And I'm sure Thursday night, before he comes, you're going to be fretting and you're probably not going to be sleeping. The President of the United States is coming to my house, right? I guarantee it wouldn't go like this. So let's do the opposite. Friday rolls around, crowds are lining the street, you know, the motorcycles and the squad cars and the Secret Service agents are coming down your road, and, you know, here comes the presidential motorcade. And when they pull into the driveway, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot. The President of the United States is coming tonight. And so you open up the door and you really weren't ready at all. You've been gardening all day, so you still got all your nasty gardening clothes on and there's dirt spots on your knees, and you kind of welcome the president into your home and his wife. And you say, oh, I'm so sorry, come on in, come on in. And of course, there's so much clutter in your entryway that, you know, the president has to step over all of it in order to get to where he needs to go. And you kind of make a comment, yeah, we haven't cleaned in a while. Sorry, we forgot that you were coming. And so then you quickly run into the kitchen, and your spouse is there making 2 steaks, one for you, one for her, right? And this is what you had planned on. You planned on having nice steaks with all the trimmings. And you say, the president's here, we forgot. What are we gonna do? Well, we could feed them the steaks. No, we're gonna eat the steaks. I think that there's some like week-old lasagna in the freezer. So why don't you pull out a couple of pieces of that, nuke it in the microwave, and we'll call that good. And so you come out and you set up these 2 beautiful plates with these nice sizzling steaks, and then in front of the president and his wife, you put just this piece of lasagna that's black and smoking. There you go. Enjoy your supper. You can barely talk to him during the whole meal. At the end of the meal, you say, I really got to wake up early in the morning, so I think it's time we all go to bed. It's like 7 o'clock at night. And so you show them to their room, you know, which is a bed and that hasn't had the sheets changed on it in years, and there's dog hair all over it. Yeah, just sleep here. They wake up in the morning, and oh man, we forgot to have fresh towels for you. So here's the towels that we already used this morning. You can just reuse them. They're just a little damp, but don't worry about it. And then as soon as they get out of the shower, you're like, you know, here's a couple pieces of bacon, please, just get out. And when they get out, you slam the door on them. Is that how you would do it? I'm guaranteeing it, even if just imagine the president you hate the most. Even if it was that president, you wouldn't treat him that way, right? Because of the respect for that office. You would do everything you could to give them a great experience in your home. And I really think that's what the book of Malachi is about. The book of Malachi is about what kind of hospitality, what kind of worship are we offering to God? Are we giving to God heartfelt, proper worship from the bottom of our hearts in the right way? Or are we giving him something that is less than that? So that's the question that Malachi is saying to these people of Judah. What kind of worship are you giving to God? And the answer is that they were giving less than their best. Secondhand, leftover worship. So last week we talked about the difference between the first fruits and the leftovers. The first fruits is when you go out into your garden and you got these nice choice tomatoes and these nice choice cucumbers, and you give those to God, and then you take the rest. Not you eat your fill, and then you have cucumbers that sit on your table for a week, and they have white spots and mold all over it, and you say, well, I guess you can have that. Okay, we don't give God leftovers. We're supposed to give God the first fruits, but that's not what was happening in Judah. You know, God said in the law, you need to bring a sacrifice, and it needs to be unblemished. It needs to be pure. It needs to be white, no spots. This is the kind of worship I desire. This is the kind of worship I want from you. This is the kind of worship that's proper. Yet here in the book of Malachi, we see that the priests were offering sacrifices that were blemished, animals that were lame, animals that were blind. This is not the kind of worship that God was after. And they were probably even telling the people, keep the best things for yourself. Go, sell that unblemished sheep on the marketplace. Get top dollar for it. Keep the money for yourself. And those ugly animals that nobody wants and nobody will pay for, those you can sacrifice to God. It's just good stewardship, right? Don't you want to be good stewards of the money and the resources God has given to you? Then why give God the best? Give God the cast-offs. Give God the leftovers. So they were using the sacrificial system not as an act of worship, but as a way to get rid of their less than desirable livestock. And I kind of mentioned that last week. Remember when, I was a kid and we used to have missionaries come over. I remember we had these missionaries from Japan, the Justinianos, and they came probably every 3 or 4 years to our church. And I remember we would have these big times where, okay, everybody bring in clothes. They got all these kids, and bring in everything you can possibly can to help them in their ministry. And so there would be a table that was in the back foyer, and we'd have it there for about 2 or 3 weeks before they would come. And people would just come into church, and they would just pour their stuff onto this table, and it was junk. I mean, it was probably the stuff that they probably couldn't even sell at their garage sale. And I remember he's a little short guy with a really fiery guy, and he would come in and he'd be so thankful. And I knew in my head, that guy cannot be that thankful for this stuff. This is junk. Is this the best we can do for this family? And that's the same thing that's going on here in the book of Malachi, is that they were giving to God, but what they were giving to God was not proper. It was an improper gift. And what it really showed is that in their heart, there was not really heartfelt worship there at all. So here is the central truth. And this is very important. Both of these words here. God wants proper, heartfelt worship. It's got to be heartfelt, and it's got to be proper. That is what God is after. So we get some charges against the priests here, because the priests are the ones that should be the gatekeepers, right? The priests are the ones that say, oh, you want to sacrifice a blind animal? No, go home and get a different animal, because this is not a proper sacrifice. But they weren't. They were actually encouraging people to give these second-rate sacrifices. So they were dishonoring God. So here's the charges against the priests. That's what we're going to look at. There's 3 of them. Jade is going to go to the next slide. Right, okay. So the priests were dishonoring God by treating the sacred things as ordinary. And you can see there's our dad there who got socks for Father's Day, and he's really happy about those socks, right? God doesn't want our old used socks. God wants something better than that. So they were dishonoring God by treating sacred things as ordinary. So let's look at verse 6 of Malachi chapter 1. A son naturally honors his father, and a slave naturally respects his master. So if I am your father, then where is my honor? And if I am your master, where is my respect? The Lord who rules over all asks you this, you priests who make light of my name, but you reply, how have we made light of your name? And here's the answer. You're offering improper sacrifices on my altar. Yet you ask, how have we offended you? Well, by treating the table of the Lord as if it is of no importance. So they were dishonoring God by treating sacred things as ordinary. So just this last week, we had Father's Day. And it's a day that we set aside as a society to honor fathers. So hopefully you did something for your dad. Maybe you gave him a call. Maybe you gave him a foot rub. Maybe you gave him a card with some of his favorite cash in there. I don't know what you did for your dad, but hopefully you did something. And hopefully, when you gave him a gift, it was something that you believed that you would like. And hopefully, it was to show appreciation from your heart for perhaps the sacrifices that your dad has made for you throughout his life. And I know there's some that have had bad experiences with their father, but at the same time, many of us have had amazing fathers. And even though our fathers are never perfect, Most of them tried their best to raise us well, and that deserves honor. So that's why we set aside that day. All right, so let's say you really want to honor your father. You really want to honor them. How would you do that? And I thought of 5 possible scenarios. You know, when I was when I was practicing this, I thought of a 6th scenario, but I'm going to leave it out. I don't want to muddy the water. But you might think in your head, well, I can think of other scenarios. But let's just stick with these 5. Okay, so I don't want you to get confused because I'm going to go through these 5 and we're going to go through them again and we're going to try to figure out what's happening in the book of Malachi and what is ideal and what isn't. All right, so here's number 1. You love your father. You have a heartfelt appreciation for what they've done for you. And you want to express that heartfelt honor for him in a good gift that he likes. And so that's what you do. You call your dad up on Father's Day and you say, hey, I just really appreciate all that you've done for me. And here's a gift. I know you like to fish. Well, here's a new tackle box just for you. I know you like to golf. Here's a new pitching wedge. Just came out on the market. And you get them the perfect gift that you know that they will love. I would say that scenario number 1 is the ideal scenario, right? You give them a gift that's proper, a gift that you know that they will like. You also show them heartfelt appreciation. Just like making sure that you show the president a good time at your house. It's the same thing. You honor them by giving them proper gift and heartfelt honor. All right, so the second scenario, let's just do the opposite. The second scenario, you hate your father. You don't really want to do anything for your father, and so you do nothing. You don't even call them up. You don't even pretend like they don't even exist. Okay, so scenario 1 is the ideal situation. Scenario number 2, we would say, is kind of less than ideal, right? You're not paying him any attention at all. The third scenario is you really appreciate all that your father has done for you. You love him, and you want him to know that you love him. You call him up, and you tell him how much you appreciate him. But then you're like, hey, I forgot to get my dad a gift. What are we going to do? Well, I got this old weed whacker out in the garage, and the engine's all froze up, and we're not going to be able to use it, so why don't we give him that? Maybe he can fix it. Or, hey, there's some stuff in the trash over there. Why don't you just go pull that out of the trash can, and he's coming in 5 minutes, and whatever's on top of the trash can, we'll give to him. Okay, so you can really love your father, and you can really want to do what's best for him, but out of laziness or whatever, you end up giving him a gift that is improper. The fourth scenario is the opposite of that. We give him the best gift in the world, a gift that he just loves and honors and cherishes. He's like, this is the best gift I've ever received. But as you're giving him the gift, you're like, I really don't like you very much. I'm just giving you this gift because I feel like I have to. All right, probably also not an ideal type of situation. And I think sometimes we do that. We give gifts for some reason other than to honor somebody. We give them to prove that we're a better person than them, or we give it out of some sense of duty, or we give it because there's something in it for me. If I don't give my dad a gift every Father's Day, he's going to write me out of the will, whatever it might be. And so here comes the final scenario. You have no heartfelt feelings for your father, and it comes out in a secondhand awful gift. So in other words, the awful gift is not because of some sort of laziness. It's because you really just want to stick it to him. And so you give him a gift that he knows that he does not like. Say he's allergic to peanuts, and so you give him a jar of peanuts and 2 things of peanut butter. All right? You know that's going to stick it to him, right? And so we're going to ask this question. What's going on here in the book of Malachi? Which one of these 5 scenarios? Because God's turning his attention to the priests here, and he says, a father deserves honor. I am your father. Where is my honor? A master deserves respect. I am your master. Where is my respect? You are showing contempt for my name by the kinds of sacrifices that you are offering. You're putting defiled, secondhand, blemished food on my altar. You are defiling my table. So last week, God started this whole thing by saying, I loved you. And they skeptically said, how have you loved us? How have you loved us? And this just seems to be kind of the format for how Malachi is addressing the people. You got this question and you got this counter question type of thing here. And so he says, you guys have shown contempt for me. How have we shown contempt for you? Well, let me tell you. You show me no honor. You show me no respect. You give me gifts that are unacceptable. I told you very clearly in the law, you could look back at Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. These are the kind of animals that I expect as sacrifices, yet these are not the kind of animals that you are offering to me. And not only are you allowing this to happen, It's not like they're just sitting there and the people are bringing in blemished animals and the priests say, all right, fine, don't go home, don't worry about it. They're actually encouraging it. Hey, why are you bringing in your best stuff? Bring in your other stuff. Bring in your secondhand stuff. Is that what the priests should be doing, encouraging secondhand, second-rate worship? And the answer, of course, is no. They're actually showing contempt for God by doing that. And they're being an example. It's not only them that's not worshiping God properly, but they're leading other people to not worship God properly either. They are treating the Lord's table with contempt. So these are the individuals chosen by God to be the closest people to the sacred things. These are people that should have known better, that probably did know better, but they were intentionally offering to God sacrifices that they knew that he did not want. I almost think I'd rather be ignored on Father's Day than for my children to know I did not want something and to give it to me just to stick it to me. But that's exactly what was going on here in the book of Malachi. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they didn't care about God. They cared about themselves. Perhaps they cared about their own property. Maybe they were just trying to ingratiate themselves to other people. Keep the best of your flocks for yourself, save your wealth, sacrifice your useless animals to God, and maybe they were trying to curry favor. They knew what God wanted, and they were intentionally teaching people to go the other way. So this would be like pastors today who intentionally alter the message for their own ends, whether that's to raise their own profile, to gather a bigger following. They create an experience where there's no call to heart change or life change. They just are trying to gather a big footprint in this world. They're not really in ministry to honor God, but for some other reason, something that's in it for them. That's not what God is looking for from his spiritual leaders. He wants spiritual leaders who care. He wants spiritual leaders who worship him in spirit and in truth. I'm going to say that a few more times because I think that's exactly what we're learning here in Malachi. Jesus says in John 6, I want worshipers who will worship me in spirit and in truth. Here we have proper worship. That's worship according to truth. We have heartfelt worship. That's worship according to spirit. That's the kind of worship that God is after. But these spiritual leaders, they weren't exhibiting this. They weren't exemplifying it. They weren't expecting it of their people. And their people were following in their footsteps. They were offering something to God that he just plain didn't want. And how dishonorable is that? You know what he wants, but you give him something different just to stick it to him. And we can think about that with dads. We could also think about that with our boss. Say your boss comes to you, I really want you to do this particular task in this way. And you do the task, but you do it in a completely different way just because you want to stick it to him. It's not going to go well, right? You're not showing your boss the respect that he deserves. And it's the same thing that these people in Malachi were doing to God. They were offering him intentionally sacrifices that they knew he would not like and that they knew he would not accept. All right, so that's the first thing. First, the priests were dishonoring God by treating the sacred as ordinary. Pretty much, they were just doing a job. They weren't really leading people to spiritual maturity like they were supposed to. Second, they were leading the people to improper worship as well. So it wasn't just them doing this, they were also being an example to the people around them. So sometimes things trickle down. And you can see that in children very clearly, right? You can see a lot of the traits of the parents end up in the kids. And that's just because those things trickle down after so many years of an example. I was taught one thing in seminary that comes to my mind almost every week still, and that is that if it's a mist in the pulpit, it's a fog in the pew. And what we were taught is if you are just even a little bit confused about what you're trying to say, then it's going to just be complete confusion in the pew. You need to make sure that you know what you're trying to say before you say it, because it's going to trickle down, right? If I'm not teaching it, you're not going to get it, right? Or if I'm being unclear, it's going to be really unclear for you. And it's the same thing. There's all sorts of traits that are like this, that trickle down from the top. And we see that here in Malachi as well. And, we just see it all over the place. I mean, every organization, every church, every country, every business has a culture. And usually that culture is set by the people at the top. So think about, I used to work at Wells Fargo. And I worked there for 3 years. And what was interesting is that they had a stated purpose. We are an ethical bank. We hold ourselves to the highest of ethics. And we care about our clients. and we care about our employees, and we want to take good care of them. That was the stated culture, but that wasn't the real culture. Because we've learned about Wells Fargo over the past 20 years. It's probably one of the most unethical banks that have ever graced this world. And that's my experience when I was there. The whole point was you need to force clients into products that they don't need just so that we can make more money. So they didn't care about their clients. They forced us to sell products to people that we knew did not need them. They didn't care about their employees. And so it doesn't matter what you say. It matters what you do. Culture is about what you value and how you live and the example that you have. And here we see that these priests, the culture itself was toxic because they didn't care about God. They were not interested in offering to God heartfelt, proper worship, and that was trickling down to the people. They were learning, maybe not by the words that the priests were saying, but by their actions, that this God guy is not really somebody that we have to honor all that much. He's not somebody that we really have to respect. We don't have to offer him proper, heartfelt worship. And so these priests were setting culture, and people were following in their footsteps. And God is angry. You have despised me. You have treated my table as contemptible. Instead of bringing me the best of your flocks, you're bringing me your blind animals, your crippled animals, your diseased animals. These aren't really sacrifices at all. All right, so say I decide to give you a car. All right, so today I'm going to go to Fort Wayne, and I'm going to buy a brand new car, just off the lot. It's got 8 miles on it. And I'm going to bring it to you and say, hey, I just really appreciate you. Here's the keys to your brand new car. Okay? That's pretty generous, right? I'm not going to do it, but it's pretty generous. Or I could say, well, I got this car, and it's been on blocks in my driveway for about 4 years. There's plants growing inside of it. It's got 250,000 miles on it. It's got a cracked block. Here, have it. Okay? Now, somebody like John or Dan might be like, I can fix that up. That's a good gift. But for most of us, we're like, what's this useless piece of lawn furniture that you've given to me, right? You're just giving me your junk. You're just giving me your cast-off. One of them is a sacrifice. The other one is clearly not a sacrifice. So it wasn't that they weren't giving anything. It's what they were giving was their cast-offs, it was their leftovers, and it was improper. It was not what God had asked for. So the priests, who were supposed to represent God to mankind, they were supposed to say, okay, this is a second-rate sacrifice. This is not acceptable. Go home, get a different animal, bring it back.